united, we'll never be defeated. The people.
Animal rebellion!
We love you. We love you. We love you.
Hi, my name is Amanda Sinclair, and I was one of the 20 activists who was arrested on October 7th, 2019 for the Bloor viaduct shutdown with Extinction Rebellion, and I was in there supporting Animal Rebellion. So today at 7:27 a.m., I was released from a holding cell after being confined for 16 hours. 9 other activists and I were trapped in a freezing cold, sterile, concrete dungeon, some of us for much longer than others. I was the third person to be put in the cell and the last person to leave. I was denied food for the entire duration of my stay because they refused to provide vegan food. By the time I was released, I had not eaten for over 24 hours. On October 7, 2019, 20 activists were arrested and charged for shutting down the Bloor viaduct. The purpose of this was to disrupt the regular routine of people's lives and to draw attention to the climate crisis. When an artery into the city is shut down and there's a strong police presence because of it, we raise noise in the media and it gets people talking. We refuse to remain silent while the people in power refuse to listen or change. So many people in power either deny the reality of climate change or they pretend to care about it by marching with climate leaders like Greta Thunberg while they approve the construction of an oil pipeline that runs through indigenous land. Because they will not listen to the people, we have no choice but to disrupt the system by engaging in civil disobedience. I want to remind everyone that none of those activists would have been there on that bridge if climate action was happening. We are not criminals. We are trying to save the planet, and yet I was carried away in handcuffs by the police and charged with the criminal offense of mischief. I was driven to the police station in the back of a cop car accompanied by a 71-year-old woman who wants there to be a future for the children. I would like to make it clear that nonviolent, peaceful activists are being charged as criminals, while the people in power who perpetuate this problem and deny doing so are free to drive us all to our extinction. Think about what that says about our society and our justice system. Now more than ever, it is vital that people start to get active and figure out which side they support. Without the help of the masses, we cannot do this, and it is everyone's future that we are fighting for. What I need to talk about, more than anything, is the experience that I had being confined in an inhumane cell for 16 hours. The cell floor was hard, cold, and the entire place was sterile. There was a tiny wall covering the steel toilet that lived in our cell. Out of the activists in the cell with me, 3 of them were in their 70s. Some of these older women were in so much pain, they begged our aggressive, unsympathetic police captors for some Tylenol, which they were repeatedly denied. One of the activists even vomited from the intensity of her pain. After we had been held in there for over 10 hours, some of us started to shake uncontrollably from how cold and tired we were. One of the older women couldn't warm up or stop shaking, and when a blanket was requested for her, the police officer refused to give one, and when one of the activists mentioned her age and that she was not doing well, the cop replied, "Too bad for her. She shouldn't have been protesting." Over the course of the 16 hours I was in there, the police lied to us repeatedly. Many times, they lied about how long the processing would take, and they lied about the procedures required. They told us we had to be processed one at a time, and yet the sergeant on duty processed the remaining 5 of us at the same time, right at the end. I requested to make a phone call, as we have that basic right when we are arrested, and they denied me that phone call. At the end, before I was about to be processed, I brought up the fact that they denied me a basic right and ignored my multiple reminders about that phone call, and they offered to let me call someone minutes before I was released. While we were waiting to be processed, we could hear 3 women cops socializing for long periods of time, laughing, using vulgar language, and just downright being unprofessional and negligent, while all of our requests for phone calls, fluid, pain relievers, and food were ignored. We sat there, hungry and shivering, some of the women in tremendous pain, listening to these cops make a joke out of abusing their power over us. When I was finally released, I told the sergeant who released me that I was supposed to be at school today, studying for my future, and that there was 3 retired women over 70 kept in that dungeon who should have been safe in their homes. But all of us chose to be there because we are fighting for everyone's future. The cop looked at me with utter disgust and repeatedly said, "You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome," after telling me to leave. I told him I hope he remembered what he did to us when our social systems collapse and we all start to suffer. While we were in there, a few other women were brought into different cells. One of them was a black woman, likely homeless, with severe mental health issues. I know this because I saw them throw her into the cell and literally slam the doors behind her. This woman was also in severe pain and was crying out for long periods of time. The cops treated her like absolute garbage. They waited long periods of time to feed her, even though she would spend excessive time crying out for food. The cops swore at her and belittled her several times, screaming things like, "Jesus effing Christ, Karen, I'm not your butler," when the woman begged for food. Finally, the cops resentfully gave her a cold, hard grilled cheese sandwich. When Karen said, "But it's not even warm," the cops lied and laughed at her, telling her the microwave was broken, despite the fact that other activists in our cell had warm sandwiches after Karen. It was clear that Karen did not deserve to be in jail. People with mental health problems need help, not punishment, and yet these cops showed no mercy. Needless to say, I saw a disgusting abuse of power on the part of the cops. By the end of our stay, some of us, including myself, started to feel like we were losing our minds, having been awake for over 24 hours, staring at 4 walls in a cold dungeon with unforgiving fluorescent lights blaring into our eyes, being belittled by people who are supposed to protect us. I do want to mention the fact that the cops who arrested us were not the aggressive people who dealt with us while we were in the cell. Quite the contrary, while I sat in handcuffs on the Bloor viaduct, I had a nice conversation with one of the cops about climate change and had a wonderful opportunity to talk about the crisis, the Amazon, and the effects of animal agriculture on the climate. While in handcuffs, I still managed to do some outreach, and the cop was respectful and genuinely interested. I stuck to the facts while talking to the cops and avoided saying anything about activism, but they didn't attempt to pry me for information anyway. The kindness I showed the cops actually humanized me and made them sympathetic to our cause, which I was very grateful for. It's important to note, I am fully aware of my white cisgender privilege. So many people are degraded and even murdered by the police for their identity, and it's not a trivial matter. However, I have also experienced severe treatment from cops, even brutal physical assault when I was younger, so I felt compelled to at least acknowledge the decency of the cops that I dealt with. I am sharing this with you because I want to make a point. I think that individual police can be kind and respectful. However, we live in a system that allows and encourages unethical police officers to abuse their power to inhuman extents. We live in a system that allows people to be branded as criminals when they are peaceful activists. We live in a system that inherently disadvantages some, like I saw with Karen. We live in a system that allows cops to metaphorically spit on a shivering old woman who just wants to see a future for the children, and the cop could have literally spit if she so desired. This is not okay. Those cops abuse their power to intimidate us and break us. They kept us in there for way longer than we needed to be as an exercise of their corrupt power. This is what happens when we allow fundamentally unjust systems to exist. But I want to make it clear that I am not broken. I want to make it clear that they tried to scare me and weaken my determination, but they strengthened it. I want to make it clear that I have never felt so certain that we must rise up in revolution. I want to make it clear that the rebellion has just begun.
We have a duty to disobey unjust laws, just like Martin Luther King said. I don't feel like a criminal. I know I'm in handcuffs, but I don't feel like a criminal. I'm fighting for the animals and the planet. I'm non-violent. I'm not a threat to society. I'm standing up for the preservation of our future and our planet.
So you closed the Bloor viaduct all morning. I mean, it's already early afternoon.
Yeah.
And you're making a point. You need to pay attention to
Exactly. Yes.
and
Yes. People need to pay attention to the climate emergency and the animal emergency. That is the point we are making. And people are willing to make sacrifices to make that happen. And we're okay with that.
thanks, Amanda. Do you know that 4 fellow animal rights activists got arrested today?
Yes, I did.
It's amazing. So 5 all of them.
Thanks,
Thank
Anita.
you. Thanks, Amanda.